They had total control of the sky. They had multispectral thermal sensors, ground-penetrating radar, and an outer security perimeter guarded by America's premier Special Mission Unit. For 3 days at Hawthorne Army Depot, 1st SFOD-Delta set a trap. They were looking for heat signatures. They were looking for broken vegetation. They were looking for movement. They found nothing. What Delta Force's Tactical Operations Center didn't know was that a 4-man sniper element from Canada's Joint Task Force 2 hadn't just bypassed their perimeter. They were sitting 300 meters inside the target compound, tracking the Delta commander through their optics, waiting for the clock to run out. This is the tactical breakdown of how Canada's quietest operators systematically dismantled the most expensive security grid in the world. To understand what happened in the high desert of Nevada, you first have to understand the terrain. Hawthorne Army Depot spans over 140,000 acres of open, high-elevation desert. There are no thick forests to hide in. There are no urban structures to offer cover. If you move across Hawthorne during the day, the desert sees you. If you move at night, thermal optics see you. In joint multinational exercises, Hawthorne serves as the ultimate proving ground for counter-infiltration. In this specific joint exercise, Delta Force took the defensive posture. Their objective was simple: secure a fortified tactical operations center, a mock high-value target compound, and prevent an opposing force from establishing a final firing position within anti-material rifle range. Delta brought everything modern military technology could offer: overlapping forward-looking infrared cameras, seismic ground sensors tuned to detect human footsteps, and airborne ISR platforms capable of spotting a thermal variance as small as a warm rock. Their opponent was a sniper reconnaissance detachment from Canada's Joint Task Force 2. On paper, this was a mismatch. Delta Force operates with a budget that dwarfs most national defense departments. JTF2, by contrast, was born out of a different necessity. Formed in 1993 from the ashes of the RCMP's Special Emergency Response Team, Canada's Tier 1 unit was built around a singular philosophy: extreme fieldcraft, mechanical discipline, and absolute low-signature operations. If Delta Force represents the American sledgehammer, overwhelming technological and kinetic dominance, JTF2 is the Canadian scalpel. And in the high desert of Nevada, JTF2 knew that trying to out-tech Delta was suicide. They had to outthink them.
The average viewer assumes that camouflage is about blending into what the human eye sees. In modern Tier 1 warfare, visual camouflage is barely 10% of the equation. The real enemy is the electromagnetic spectrum. When a FLIR sensor sweeps a desert floor, it doesn't see color, it sees thermal energy, specifically the temperature difference between an object and its surrounding environment, known in tactical doctrine as delta T. A human body sitting at 37 degrees Celsius in a desert that has cooled down to 15 degrees at night glows like a neon sign. So how did JTF2 become invisible to Delta's thermal drones? They exploited a natural phenomenon known as thermal crossover. Twice a day, once at dawn and once at dusk, the temperature of the ground matches the surface temperature of the human body. During these brief windows, thermal sensors suffer a massive loss of contrast. Background noise washes out the display. JTF2 timed their primary lateral movements to coincide precisely with these crossover windows. When the drones were airborne during the dead of night, JTF2 went underground, literally. Instead of moving across the surface, the Canadian operators utilized micro-terrain, shallow washouts, dried creek beds, and natural erosion cuts no deeper than 12 inches. When an airborne sensor made a pass, the operators didn't just lie down, they deployed specialized multispectral thermal blankets designed to trap convection heat beneath a layer of insulating material while scattering the surface temperature to match the surrounding rocks. This wasn't fast work. This was agonizing, millimeter by millimeter movement. The Canadian team covered less than 200 meters an hour. Every step was calculated. Every piece of gear was bound with paracord and tape to prevent micro-rattles that seismic sensors could pick up. To the untrained eye, this level of patience seems impossible. But in the Canadian sniper community, fieldcraft is a religion. This is the same pedigree that would later produce the longest confirmed sniper kill in human history, a 3,540-meter shot in Iraq using the Macmillan TAC-50. That level of precision doesn't start at the trigger. It starts in the dirt, 3 days before the shot is ever taken. By night 2 of the exercise, Delta Force's outer patrol elements were growing confident. They had swept the primary approach corridors. Their ground sensors along the ridges were silent. Their thermal sweeps showed nothing but native wildlife and cooling rock formations. Delta assumed JTF2 would attempt a classic standoff approach, establishing a position on the high ground 1,000 meters out and attempting a long-range simulator engagement. They were wrong. JTF2 didn't take the high ground. They took the dead space. Every sensor grid, no matter how advanced, has structural blind spots created by geometry. High-mounted cameras can't see directly beneath their mounting structures. Drones flying high-altitude orbits create shadow zones around low-lying buildings. JTF2 mapped these blind spots during their initial overwatch phase. Instead of staying far away, the Canadian team slipped under the coverage fan. They moved through an unmonitored drainage culvert that Delta's engineers had deemed too narrow for a combat-equipped operator to crawl through. It took the 4-man Canadian team 6 hours to negotiate 60 meters of concrete drainage pipe. They carried their C-15 LRSWs, short-barreled C-8 carbines, communications gear, and hydration packs, moving inch by inch without allowing metal to strike concrete. By 0300 hours on the third morning, the JTF2 element emerged inside the primary compound perimeter. They were now standing less than 300 meters from Delta's Tactical Operations Center. They didn't dig a traditional hide site. They utilized an abandoned maintenance shed on the compound grounds, a structure Delta's security detail had searched on day 1 and marked as cleared. The Canadians slipped inside, positioned themselves deep within the shadow of the interior walls to prevent muzzle flash visibility, and waited for sunrise.
At 0600 hours, the exercise window officially expired. Inside the Delta Force command tent, the mood was satisfied. The perimeter had held. The technical grid had registered 0 breaches. The ground sensors were untouched. From a command perspective, the defense had been a complete success. The opposing force had failed to establish a line of sight within the allotted time. The Delta exercise controller picked up his radio headset to call a halt to the scenario. Before he could speak, an incoming secure transmission broke the squelch. Canadian operator radio voice. Control, this is Red Cell. Exercise time expired. Before you call endex, please advise the Delta commander that he is currently holding a green thermal mug in his right hand, standing at the center map table. Silence fell over the Tactical Operations Center. The voice on the radio didn't stop there. The JTF2 sniper proceeded to read off the exact grid coordinates of every senior officer in the tent, followed by the specific structural weaknesses of the command post's concealment netting. The Canadian team hadn't just watched the compound, they had spent the last 5 hours running target acquisition passes on every key piece of leadership inside the base. Had this been a live kinetic operation, the entire command structure of the defending force would have been eliminated before the first security alarm ever sounded. When the Delta operators walked over to the maintenance shed, they found the JTF2 team packing up their optics. There were no elaborate high-tech gadgets strewn across the floor, no mobile sensor arrays, just 4 men, their rifles, multispectral veils, and an unmatched level of cold, methodical discipline. The Hawthorne exercise wasn't an anomaly. It was a demonstration of a fundamental truth in modern warfare. Technology is an amplifier, not a replacement for basic military fieldcraft. American Tier 1 forces came away from Hawthorne with a renewed respect for their northern neighbors. It wasn't long after this exercise that this relationship between these two units was cemented in real-world combat. During Operation Enduring Freedom in Afghanistan, JTF2 was integrated into Task Force K-Bar, a joint special operations task force commanded by U.S. Navy SEAL Captain Robert Harward. Harward would later publicly state that out of all the international special operations forces under his command, Canada's JTF2 was his absolute first choice for high-risk direct action and special reconnaissance. In Canada, special operations forces don't get Hollywood movies, they don't write tell-all books, and you won't see their faces on news broadcasts. They operate in total darkness, backed by a defense budget a fraction the size of their allies, proving time and again that superior fieldcraft, patience, and intelligence will always beat brute force. They are the quiet professionals, and if you ever see them, it's already too late. If you appreciated this deep dive into Canadian Special Operations history, hit the like button and subscribe to Military Warfare for more clinical tactical breakdowns. Let us know in the comments which Tier 1 unit we should analyze next.